So, operant conditioning is another sort of form of associative conditioning, and it is learning that is controlled by the consequences of an animal's behavior, or what was initially described by some of the early researchers in this field as operants. This is the animal operating on its environment, like pushing a lever, for example, to create some kind of a consequence. It's also known as instrumental conditioning because the organism's response, that lever pressing, for example, serves an instrumental function. It gets something, in response, to what it's doing in its environment. And it actually kind of derived out of work by this researcher known as E.L. Thorndike in 1898, who actually worked with cats, and he put cats into these boxes, and they were called puzzle boxes. And in order to get outside of that box, the cat had to do a number of things in sequence. It had to pull a little rope or push a lever or do something. There were a whole series of steps that this cat had to take in order to get outside of the puzzle box. And Thorndike made sure that the cat was extremely motivated to get outside of the puzzle box. He apparently would not feed the cat for a while and then put a bowl of fish right outside of the puzzle box. The cat had to figure out, what do I do to get out of this thing? And so he came up with what he called his law of effect, because it turned out that initially it took a while, for the cat to get out of the puzzle box the first time. But the second time, it had learned something. And then it got better and better and better. And the amount of time it took and the, specificity and the, integrity of all those steps necessary, improved and improved, with repetition. So Thorndike's law of effect states that responses that produce a satisfying effect in a particular situation become more likely to occur again in the situation, and responses that produce a discomforting effect, right, become less likely to occur again in that situation. So this is called Thorndike's law of effect from 1898. And the terms satisfying and dissatisfying or discomforting, that appeared in the law of effect were eventually replaced by the terms reinforcing. So something is reinforcing if it gets you to emit that behavior again, right? And also punishing if it decreases the incidence of a behavior. And operant conditioning became a more preferred approach. So again, learning control by the consequences of an animal's behavior or operations or operants on its environment. And this is a form of associative learning because you're associating a number of different stimuli in this circumstance. And if a stimulus is present, it means then that if you exhibit this operant, if you act upon your environment in this way, you will get that specific satisfying state of affairs, like a food pellet or some kind of reward or reinforcer. Now, B.F. Skinner is a very famous behaviorist, and this operant conditioning paradigm was used extensively in behaviorist studies, and he didn't like Thorndike's apparatus at all for a number of reasons. One, first of all, he didn't like wrangling cats. Apparently, if a cat figures out how to get out of a box, right, a puzzle box, and gets the fish, and then you try to put that cat back inside, you're going to get scratched. So Skinner didn't like that at all. Also, he didn't really like the idea that you were observing and recording the times. There was an observer there. He wanted it to be far more, objective. So that you may have heard of these famous experimental, devices. They're called Skinner boxes. They record animal behavior without direct human intervention or observation. There's usually some kind of a stimulus presentation device. It could be like a light that can come on, for example, or a tone that can be initiated. And then there are generally two levers in this box. One is the active lever. This means if you press it, there's the consequence that the animal is, potentially seeking. Like, for example, it can deliver drug, basically to the animal, or deliver a pellet of food or something like that. And the other one is what we call the inactive lever. And the fact that you have the two levers is, especially as somebody, again, who comes out of a drug research background, like if you give a drug that's kind of a psychostimulant that's going to increase locomotor activity, lots of moving around and things like that, you want to make sure that the animal pressing the active lever, it's a specific operant. It's something. They want to press that specific lever, and it's not like they're just bouncing around, the Skinner box, bumping into everything and hitting both levers. So you look at the rate of responding on the active versus the inactive lever, and it's a very useful experimental setup. It's been used in lots and lots of psychological and behavioral neuroscience research, it actually has revealed quite a bit about the complexity of animal behavior. Skinner, his experimental animals, they were certainly rats, but also pigeons, and it was really pretty useful that these boxes recorded behavior without direct human intervention or observation. So I'm curious as to what you think about the usefulness of this approach in research and the usefulness of having these Skinner boxes. And I also have an example up here of like one of Thorndike's classic puzzle boxes with a German Shepherd who demonstrates their improvement over time in that environment.